Have you ever wondered what's really going on in your head when you watch porn? Well, we're going to get right into it. To even begin to answer that, we first have to understand the most basic, most powerful driver in your brain, its reward system.
And trust me, the science here is absolutely fascinating. So let's take a quick look under the hood at this powerful system that's running the show when it comes to motivation, pleasure, and our habits.
Okay, so imagine your brain has this built-in guidance system. It's designed for one main reason, to get you to repeat behaviors that are good for survival. Things like eating food, finding a partner. It's an ancient system, and it runs on a really simple principle.
This is what neuroscientists call the reward system. You can just think of it as the part of your brain that screams, "Yes, that was good! Let's do that again!" It's really the engine that drives us to do pretty much everything.
And here's how it works in a nutshell. It's a simple, three-step loop. First, you do something rewarding. Second, your brain releases a chemical called dopamine. And third, that good feeling makes your brain learn to go after that thing again. Simple, right? Action, reward, repeat.
Now, a lot of people think dopamine is the pleasure chemical, but that's not quite right. It's really more of the motivation molecule. It's the thing that gives you that feeling of wanting, of anticipation. It's the go-get-it signal that drives you to seek something out, even before you've gotten it.
So this reward system is perfectly tuned for the natural world. But what happens when our modern technology creates things that are way more intense than what our brains evolved to handle? This brings us to a really key idea called a supernormal stimulus.
The classic example of this comes from nature. Scientists found that if you give a bird a choice between its own small, pale eggs and a giant, brightly colored fake egg, it will try to sit on the fake one every time. The fake egg is a supernormal stimulus. It's an exaggerated version of reality that hijacks the bird's natural instincts.
And as psychologist Deirdre Barrett says, we humans have gotten really good at making our own supernormal stimuli. Think about junk food that's scientifically engineered to be irresistible, or in the case of what we're talking about today, internet pornography, with its non-stop novelty and intensity.
Now, this leads us to a really common myth, the idea that you can only get addicted to a substance, something you drink or inject. But brain science is telling us a very different story. Here's where it gets wild. When you look at brain scans, you see that intense behaviors, like gambling for instance, can light up the exact same reward circuits as addictive drugs. To your brain, the source of the intense reward doesn't matter as much as the intensity itself. That's why behavioral addictions are now officially recognized.
So, how can this powerful reward system actually lead to a loss of control? Well, scientists have mapped out a pretty clear three-stage cycle that explains it.
It all starts with the binge. That's the big rush of pleasure. But that rush is always followed by a crash, which is basically a negative emotional state. And it's that crash that then fuels the third stage, a powerful, intense craving that pushes you right back to the beginning of the cycle.
And it's so important to understand this. When we say withdrawal for a behavior, we're not talking about getting the physical shakes. We're talking about a psychological state, that feeling of anxiety or being irritable, or just feeling down when you're not doing the thing.
This brings us to maybe the most important distinction of all, the difference between liking something and wanting something. Liking is the actual pleasure you get from it. Wanting is that intense motivational drive that makes you go get it. And here's the tricky part. With compulsive behaviors, the liking can actually go down over time, while the wanting, that compulsive craving, gets stronger and stronger.
Okay, that's a lot of brain science, but let's bring this back to the real world. What does this all mean for relationships and our sex lives?
So here it is, the big question. Does using porn automatically cause issues with your sex drive? The answer, honestly, is not a simple yes or no. It's way more complicated than that.
One possible issue is something called tolerance. Think of it like this. If your brain gets used to a super high level of stimulation, it might adapt by basically turning down its own volume. The potential risk for some people is that real-life intimacy might then feel, well, less rewarding by comparison.
But, and this is a really big but, it's so important to see the whole picture. Our libido is one of the most complex parts of being human. It's affected by everything. Our relationships, stress, depression, hormones, medications, health. It's almost never just one single thing.
So as we start to wrap this up, the whole point of this explainer is not about judgment. Not at all. It's about awareness, about understanding how our brains are wired to work in this wild modern world.
So, if you remember anything, remember these three things.
1. Your brain is always changing based on what you do. 2. A big red flag for any behavior is when that compulsive wanting starts to take over the actual liking. And 3. Context is everything. Sexual health is about your whole life.
And of course, just a reminder that this is all general information for educational purposes. If you're actually concerned about your own health or habits, the best thing you can do is talk to a doctor or a therapist.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. In a world that is literally filled with digital superstimuli, all competing for your attention, how do we make sure we stay in the driver's seat of our own reward system?